it seems ridiculous that a commanding officer of a battalion, a regiment, a squadron is entrusted to take 500, 600, 700 people to war. It's entrusted with their lives, but we don't entrust them to buy software for their equipment. To me, that is insane, and that feels like a massive win that we can very easily bring about. Decentralization of acquisition, and here's why.
This is All Quiet on the Second Front, a podcast where boring conversations around defense tech and national security come to die. Join me, Tyler Sweatt, and my Second Front comrades as we dismantle the mundane, cut through the bureaucratic BS to demystify the world of defense tech. But be warned, this is not a typical government podcast. Ready to get weird?
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Tyler Sweatt. Welcome to another episode of All Quiet on the Second Front, the podcast where boring defense talk comes to die. We're going to go a little international today. Pretty excited. Good friend, man amongst town right now, Rob Murray, Chief Innovation Officer, Saab, and just an extraordinary human being. So I'm excited to chat, about Saab and what does innovation mean there and what does it look like from an incumbent as it's transforming for the future. Equally interesting to talk about your journey and where you're seeing trends move sort of across the market. So thanks for stopping by, brother.
So it's wonderful to be here, and it's a very, very generous introduction. Thank you. And maybe I can talk a little bit about my background, and story.
Give the people what they want.
I'll keep it brief. But it's something which kind of has obviously shaped me, and leads to a lot of my perspectives on how we see things now. So my story starts, I suppose, about 25, 26 years ago, when I was a young 17-year-old, which dates me. And I thought it was a smart move to drop out of high school without graduating and to join the military. My parents were less enthusiastic about this life choice. But to their great
Joke's
credit,
on them now.
Yeah, exactly. To their great credit, they allowed me to do it. And so I went into the ranks of the British military at 17, into the Royal Air Force.
Yep.
Went to work at Britain's permanent joint headquarters, which is where all operations the UK runs. That's where it's centred in, just outside London, in a bunker, deep underground. And after about 24 months, I kind of realised I'd probably made a wrong decision leaving school. Could have thought it. A 17-year-old makes a wrong choice.
Yep.
And also, I kind of realised that I probably joined the wrong service. Each service has its own culture, its own way of doing things. And so a couple of army officers there, because it's a joint headquarters, so you have all of the Navy, Army, Marines, Air Force, etc., saw some potential in me and helped me go through the selection process to get into Sandhurst, which is Britain's Army Academy, so like the equivalent of West Point. So I did that, got in there, went through that training, commissioned into the artillery as an artillery officer, specialised in the world of surveillance and reconnaissance. That was what I'd spent my time doing in the army. Went to all of the top 10 holiday destinations that career takes you to.
Finest places.
Oh yeah, of course. Suntan guaranteed. And then, having reached the dizzy heights of Major, I then left and went to Brussels to work for the Secretary General of NATO. So first, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, and this was in 2013. And then when he moved on, it was Jens Stoltenberg, so the current Secretary General, and he's about to leave soon as well. Number of jobs there. I was head of intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance for the Irons, very much on the policy side. Looked after all of the land and maritime capabilities as well. An epic job of 30 odd countries back then, trying to make sure they had the right stuff for when conflict might come knocking. And the last job I had was as head of innovation for NATO. And that was where I came up with the idea for a thing called Diana, Defence Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, and also the NATO Innovation Fund, which is a $1 billion venture capital fund. So they were my two babies, and it's wonderful to see the amazing Deep Chana running the Diana side of things.
So we had Deep down at South by.
Did you?
So, yeah, we did.
Very good.
We're doing. We're helping them think through technical onboarding for Diana. So how do you marry the lattice up with the capital so that you can get ROI, trying to take your idea with deep and just drive it even further.
Very good. And the Innovation Fund as well. Wonderful people there. Fred from Sony running that shop, and Fiona Murray, my namesake, on the board, looking after things there. So that was great. And then I kind of knew I'd been there for 10 years in Brussels. It didn't matter how high I went in that organisation, I was never going to beat those outcomes of Diana and the NIF, the NATO Innovation. So
it's a pretty big bell ringing win right there.
It was, and we'll get into this maybe, but like I can't tell you, Tyler, how hard it was to convince 30 odd countries to sign up to this stuff. And it was me, Phil Lockwood, Moritz Zimmerman, Lars Froland, like 4 of us pretty much driving this, and it was tough. So anyway, that was done. And then I needed a break. I was exhausted, quite frankly. So I went to Johns Hopkins University as a professor, taught in the engineering school there about leadership.
Nice laid back job.
Yeah.
I needed a break. I'm going to go to Johns Hopkins and sling it with the engineers. All right.
So it was, that was cool. And I still have an adjunct professor role there. Still doing stuff there. And then Michael Brasser, we got to meet when probably about 5 or 6 years ago in Brussels, when he was there working for the US mission to NATO. And we became very close friends and have done ever since. And we then decided to propose the idea of what is now launched today, Scapa, for Saab. And Saab, to their great credit, took a chance, rolled the dice on us. And Michael's got a huge pedigree with creation and the creator of Task Force 59 in the US Navy. So that has led us to today, to San Diego, to sunny San Diego, where we're launching Scapa.
Finally sunny.
Yeah.
It rained a little bit when I got in. I was like, wait a second.
Some British weather, I think I must have brought with me. But I think that whole journey, from being in the ranks as a teenager to an army officer to working at the sort of highest levels of international politics within this world, and also then getting very close to the venture capital community and the startup community through Diana and the NIF, and then being at a university and teaching some of this stuff, and now in the corporate world, I feel that I've seen this problem set from multiple different angles, and fundamentally, to me, it's about trying to get, and I know this sounds cliched, but trying to get the best tech to those troops that need it as quickly as possible.
Amen.
It's nothing more.
It's the only thing that matters. None of the other bullshit matters. If we fail at that, everything else is fucking irrelevant. Out of the gate.
And there's really, we'll get into this now, but I see this as 3 big mountains, if you like. There's the money mountain, like, all right, is there cash to spend? There's then the contract mountain, like, okay, how do you, if it's for government, for example, okay, how can you get contracts issued quickly enough to those companies that need them, that don't have the working capital to kind of have these long cycles? And then for the companies, there's the production mountain. Like, okay,
can you actually scale it?
You've got to make stuff quickly.
Yeah.
And so each has different issues, but they are, to me, most of the challenges sit within one of those mountains.
Would be interesting. So taking that and sort of flipping it around a little bit. I think when, for better or worse, a lot of the conversations, and you and I have been party in probably 100 of these over the last year or two, a lot of the conversation becomes like a Silicon Valley versus everybody else. And there's this like weird vision that because Silicon Valley can build good software, that they can scale, to your point on production, that they can deliver capability, hardened capability downrange. And I think there's a point where they can, and there's a degree they can, but it ignores a role for some of the incumbents or the larger sort of metal bending who also have generations of experience in building the hardened capability. It might not be pretty, it might not be fancy or sexy, but it works in like a comms contested environment where it works, in GPS. Now, you sit in this interesting spot of marrying those two up. And then Saab is now increasingly taking this position of sort of being the innovator who, after 85 years, whatever it's been, is now all of a sudden slinging autonomous boats and new software designs and all of that, right? Like, how are you guys looking at the sort of intersection of, new tech and old tech in defense, and Saab's role and what that means for the future?
So I think you've hit on a really key point here. And it's that notion that whilst one does need to take on board these new technologies and should do and lean into those. And in my opinion, if we want to take a slight step backwards for a moment, I don't think there's ever been a moment, certainly in our lifetimes, where we haven't had enough technology, right? We're never short of technology. And so the real challenge is, how do we get that to market? That product market fit. And it's a phrase I'm not massively comfortable with. It feels a little bit too corporate, quite frankly.
For people who use product mission fit.
Yeah,
it feels more appropriate.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's perfect, but it feels less transactional.
Yeah. Well, let me come back. Let me circle back.
Yeah.
That's a very, very good point. So the point being is that it's not in the challenge we face right now. And there's war in Europe, war in the Middle East, and who knows how things are going to progress with regards to China and the Pacific. This is without doubt the most unstable geopolitical situation we've faced since probably the early to mid 1980s. Before the Cold War started to die down. So what? So what does that mean? It means that in this technological race we find ourselves in, it's not going to be those countries with the best technology that wins the race. It's going to be those countries with the most agile bureaucracy. And that agility is not only on the government side, but it's also in large companies. So to answer your question, when we come back about and think, all right, Silicon Valley, globally renowned for producing phenomenal technology and attracting amazing talent to this very small part of the world. We need to recognize and understand that that's a good thing. It's not a competition. It's not an either or here. And equally, we need to recognize, going back to sort of that analogy of those three mountains when it comes to money, governments don't have the money to suddenly replace billions of dollars of armaments, of hardware, of jets, of tanks, of submarines. So one has to be able to leverage what one has. And the Silicon Valley, I'm being sort of generalist with my sort of definition here, they need to be part of that community. And I think
it's a lever.
Yeah, exactly.
To your point on leverage, like it is a lever we can use.
And I think sometimes one needs to just slightly step back in history and remember how Silicon Valley was built, how it came about. It was because of the Department of Defense, right? And that is why we have this amazing community that exists now. So I feel that there is probably a larger degree of humility that is needed, both from the primes and also from the Silicon Valley folks, to realize that, right, one has to be able to work and collaborate together. They're not substitutes for one another. They are complements. And therefore, I feel that when I see some of the amazing work that goes on, and I'll point actually across the ocean to Europe, to the German startup Helsing.
Yeah.
When I see the work that they are doing, where they are taking existing armaments, existing hardware, existing electronic warfare boxes on Eurofighter fast jets in the German Air Force. They're then, because they've been created with open architecture, they're essentially jailbreaking those bits of hardware and wildly improving the capability. And that's and they've done it there. They've done it with the British Royal Navy, with sonar as well. Yeah, they're not trying to replace what is already there, because fundamentally it's too expensive to do that.
You can't do a full rip.
You can't do a full, but that notion of being able to enhance and so what does that mean for prime companies? It means a little bit of business model innovation. It means a little bit of reimagining what the OEM is and how one thinks about design authority, and having a monopoly over that, which has traditionally been the case. So in other words, only company X is able to do the software upgrade for their bits of hardware. That's not going to cut it any down. And so having that recognition and actually embracing and leaning into that is what Saab is pretty good at, certainly in Europe, and that is what's being brought across the United
increasingly
States.
In the United States now.
Exactly that. So this is that's why we've just launched a San Diego office. We've just launched Scapa today, which is kind of our offering to the defense community. This isn't the culture of the company is such that it's not about oh, look at us, we're trying to do things. It's us. It's like no, this is a collaborative effort. Be it collaboration with startups, with risk capital, with universities, governments. That's how we win.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah,
right. It has to be a broader. The terms like whole of government, whole of community always get thrown around, but I think it's important to understand the different constituencies and the lever that they then make available to national security or geopolitics. And I won't need to limit that down to an organization or an entity, but the ability to find equilibrium between those three to lever for effects, right? Like so much we talk about, hey, a thing or a contract or, pick winners, whatever that means. And so little do we talk about, hey, we've actually delivered an effect. We've allowed an effect to be transferred on the battlefield, whether that's, a warhead on a forehead, whether that is a soldier saved, whether that is a new sensor, through this equilibrium that we found back here. And I think you guys are a really interesting positioning on that because you're able to draw from all of the work you guys have been doing across Europe, your familiarity and everything you guys have learned from automotive and aviation and all of that, and take that collaborative sort of tribal community building approach, but you're doing it at such a scale that it's not like, it's one thing if I'm like, hey, I'm a man of the people. Kick rocks, Sweat. You're like a small fucking nobody. When Saab comes in and says, hey, this is the fabric we're trying to put down for the community to lift all boats, that is a materially different conversation. And I think that puts you guys in a really interesting sort of, power's wrong, but opportunity. So as you guys look at, as you sit down with Mike and the team, what do you guys see, next 18, 24, what's got you excited, or take it either way, or what's got you scared and concerned?
So there's probably a couple things to think about here. I think first of all, and we talked about that phrase, product market fit, product mission fit, transactional. Actually, and it's taken me quite a few years to kind of realize this, that a lot of the real impact you just described there, taking ideas to impact, really generates around personal relationships. And it's remarkable. And I'm always kind of sort of blown away almost, certainly when I was in Brussels. I mean, you'd be dealing with some fairly significant influential policies that would be going up to Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, defense ministers, foreign ministers, etc. in European countries. And you'd assume there's a whole kind of just machine and process to kind of deal with it. And to some extent there is, but there's also who you know, the relationships. And it's taken me kind of a while to realize this, the importance of relationships. So the point to your question, how do we see ourselves and the challenges and opportunities and so forth? Fundamentally, I think we have to be able to step away from seeing our role and our activity in the ecosystem as transactional. It's about people. It is about people. It's about relationships. And fundamentally, it's about building trust. Yeah. And it's not just trust in that we are seen and actually do deliver on what we say we'll do, just good sort of human being type stuff. But also then, as we start to lean into these new technologies of artificial intelligence, mesh networks, of things which are not necessarily that prevalent on the battlefield at the moment, building trust with operators that this stuff works, building trust with policymakers that it's not just some random black box, that things are auditable, explainable, responsible. So it keeps coming back to trust relationships. So that, to me, when I look at the wave of new technologies that are coming at us, biotechnologies, with it, autonomy, with it, AI, with it, quantum, the list goes on. It's about trust in people, fundamentally. And so that is right at the center of this. I think as well that when I look at some of the challenges, the thing which strikes me, and it goes back to, again, those three mountains of money, of contracts, of production. We as an industry are just not very good at production. Right? We make things bespoke constantly. And it seems very odd that, and I saw this across all NATO nations, this isn't just a UK thing, it's not just a US thing, it's across all the European allies and Canada and the US.
Scale production is hard.
It's really hard. But also we seem comfortable that when one tries to acquire things, buy things, that there's a 20, 50, $100 million cost overrun on some massive project. And it is what it is. And whilst, yes, there's audits and reports and, generally the oversight and governance entities, be they in Congress, in the Senate, or in the UK House of Commons, whatever, they will rightly be upset. This problem of defence acquisition just continues. Yeah. So what does that mean when we think about production? I think we have a role to play here in the company, whereby we really, really need to nail production. And when I did my MBA at the University of Chicago, and that's like a full-on hardcore finance school.
Oh yeah.
Much to
which is fantastic.
My surprise and shock. And you're taught there, like most business schools, you don't hold inventory. Yeah. Why? Because obviously cash flow is tied up, so on and so forth. But I feel that in this industry of defence, given those geopolitical challenges we see and face right now, given the significant levels of uncertainty, it kind of makes sense to hold inventory. And when you're a company like Saab, you can afford to do that. So, but the way in which we produce, the way in which we manufacture, we've got to be leaning in additive manufacturing at scale. We've got to be leaning
finding
into
efficiencies in there and leverage.
100%. We've got to be getting those cost curves down. And when I think about Replicator, for example, and I know Replicator gets a little bit of a tough press, and obviously now it's got some money behind it in last month's appropriations.
Folks were calling it JADC3 in the beginning as a joke.
Yeah.
I was like, it might be real. Hold on.
Who knows?
Give it time.
Yeah, and it's like, now that there's some money behind it, but it's actually, well, the DoD, and Kath Hicks, to her great credit, has come out with a really bold and ambitious plan.
Yeah.
And I think it's slightly naive and simply too easy for industry to say, where's the money? Okay, show me the money and then we'll react. It's like, no. Hang on a minute. Yeah. We can see the instability that's going on. We can see the intent, in this case of Kath Hicks. Yep. It's now for us in industry
to actually incentive to be like, you're trying to do something. Yeah. We're just going to throw darts.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, no, we need to lean into this. Yeah. And actually, we need. So it's a very sort of long answer, but the challenge I see, the biggest challenge, is production and being able to produce at speed and being able to produce at a price point, a cost curve that is scalable, absolutely scalable, and put these numbers right down at the bottom. Which at the moment, our industry, every bit of our industry, right, struggles with this. Yep. And so that within Saab and within Scapa is what one of the big things we'll be looking to try and address.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pivot us somewhere I don't think I expected to go. But coming off of that, I'll say there is somewhere like a PhD level study that could be done on like how the U.S. needs to just look at the primes as like nationalized and not expect them to be dealing with like public market reactions to share price. Because there's a little bit of like there's an intersection of pretty opposing incentive models there. Yeah. That, again, it's easy to throw darts at like the big five, but then when you try to reconcile it, you're like, okay, well, how would you harmonize that requirement and your, earnings calls?
Well, that's a really interesting point. And probably up until, I would say, I don't know, 12, 18, 24 months ago, if one were to talk about, it's particularly in Washington, particularly in the United States, given it is the home of capitalism, if one were to talk about, or I should say the home of modern capitalism, Adam Smith, our old Scottish economist friend, would probably have a view on this. So home of modern capitalism. But anyway,
we'll take credit for it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, mate. So I think that if you were to utter the words industrial strategy in DC, you would be looked upon like a leper and just be like, what are you talking about? Like, what is this socialist European nonsense you speak of?
Super weird.
What's quite interesting now is the current administration is very much leaning into industrial strategy for various reasons, predominantly driven by the competition with China. But it does lead to a conversation about what you're describing, Tyler, about, okay,
we drove a market consolidation and now we're mad we're not getting competition at scale. And you're like,
how does one think about one's defense champions in the context of an industrial strategy?
Yeah.
And for the Americans,
I don't know the answer.
That's not really, that's difficult for policymakers to rationalize with.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a very different way of thinking than has been the case really since the Reagan era.
So we have two questions left. We talked a lot about production and the need to be able to produce at scale. I want to flip that away from like metal and capability and talk about the human side of it. Right? We opened with, hey, there's probably not been in the last, 40 years, 50 years, as much geopolitical complexity and uncertainty as we've seen. Now, let's juxtapose that with fractured social fabrics at the high school, college age. I mean, you turn on any freaking computer right now, or any phone or TV, and you can see it. How are you, given sort of background, military and NATO, when you look at generations that are coming in, right, the front of funnel, for who's employing capability to make sure we're delivering and generating effect? Confident, concerned. What's the broader West's ability to produce exceptional humans to preserve the integrity of the free world?
So when I was teaching full time at Johns Hopkins, I was teaching undergraduates. So this is just a year or so ago. Yeah. So I suppose I'm slightly guilty of teaching this next generation.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
To some extent, it's on me. But
I feel like Hopkins doesn't have a Hamas camp in front of it right now, so it's not on the bad list.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So when I look at the caliber of the students coming through there, I am actually very, very pleased and relieved. These are incredibly smart individuals, incredibly curious, and wonderfully creative. So in terms of the intellectual rigor, and of course, all right, I recognize it's Johns Hopkins, so all right, it's the sample size is
but it matters. Yeah, it's a data point.
So in terms of the individuals, and I would say their values, what I saw, and these were predominantly American students, but quite a sort of sprinkling of internationals.
Yeah.
Very, very reassured. Very reassured. In terms, and quite frankly, in terms of their work ethic as well.
I think it's important for people to hear that. Because like it's easy. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to be like, oh, these kids these days, like, oh, I walk to school in the snow and they don't get it. I'm like, I don't know, man, my kids are smarter than I am right now, and they're freaking 16 and 13 and they run laps around me.
Yeah, well, so I think from that side, I'm very, very positive. I also think that we as a society, and I can't really kind of pinpoint this too much, but we've kind of infantilized a little bit those in their 20s. So when we think of someone who's 21, 22, 23, I think that there's still a label over these individuals as, they're still kids, still a kid, etc. And when I think I was that age, I was a platoon commander commanding 30-odd guys on operations around the world.
Around the valley in eastern Afghanistan.
Yeah. So my point being is not to kind of pull up a sandbag and compare war stories about how it was in the old days. My point being is, well, we know that 20-year-olds can do amazing things. 21, 22, and I'm not suggesting like amazing things, but having
they're capable of responsibility and accountability, and if we strip them of that, they're never going to grow.
Exactly that, and so therefore, it's not really on them.
Yeah.
It's really
100%.
on us to make sure that we empower these people, that actually we give them the opportunities to grow. We give them, quite frankly, the space to fail, and we shouldn't. There's a there's a psychological challenge with failure because we have, this notion of humiliation that comes with it, and our brain is evolutionary hardwired to avoid risk, and so therefore, we don't take risk because we fear humiliation. So our job, quite frankly, my job, as I see it, when I think of younger people in my team and kids coming through, is to absolutely delegate to the point of discomfort, the point of my discomfort, but I'm 100% accountable. I'm 100% responsible for how it goes down. Yep. But you got to give them the safe space and the safety net to try things. And I feel that...
And that's an important inflection, though. It's like, I think safe space has gotten weaponized a little bit to a place where there's like no right or no wrong, and time is fake and outcomes are fake. And like, you can, just because you say things, safe space should allow for like abject failure, but promote learning.
Exactly. You learn from it. You have a debrief, you learn, you move on, and
then go try again.
Yeah, and so I think that it's too easy to point at the next generation coming through and say, they're just snowflakes and that is what it is. But I think the other point that often gets, and I think COVID brought this to the surface, is this notion about mental well-being, about mental health, and that actually, that's some sort of weakness having strong. And I think that's absolute nonsense. The fact that, I've used personal trainers, physical trainers and stuff like that to get my body fit. Yep. Why wouldn't you use the same for your mind?
100%.
Right? The two go hand in hand. Yep. And so I think that the generation coming through understand this better.
Be more resilient than
and,
we were.
And because they are more aware of their own self-well-being. And that's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
So I'm actually pretty positive and pretty confident about the generation coming through.
I love that answer. All right, last question. King for a day. And since there actually are kings where you come from, this is super just tailor-made, brother. King for a day. You wave. Now I usually say a wand. I don't know what the king has. Like I'm sure he's got
staff of some description.
Yeah, the staff of Ra. That's niche, but it's a good joke. What you change one thing? What's the one thing you change? We talked about the 3 mountains. We talked about capability. We talked about scale. We talked about people and conflict. What do you change and why?
I would decentralize acquisition to the lowest level possible. Yeah. What I mean by that, I mean that it seems ridiculous that a commanding officer of a battalion, a regiment, a squadron, whatever it might be, is entrusted to take 500, 600, 700 people to war. Is entrusted with their lives. But we don't entrust them to buy software for their equipment. We don't entrust them to buy whatever it might be. To me, that is insane. And that feels like a massive win that we can very easily bring about. Decentralization of acquisition. And here's why. Now, it's not realistic, of course, to have 20 different COs suddenly buying different variants of tanks and jets. Okay, of course, for those big things, you do need...
You get standardization, design patterns set.
Fine.
Yeah, got it.
But for smaller stuff and for software, I would love to see a whole different approach of 20 different COs buying 20 different things. Because here's what will happen. Once you get through that first hurdle, that market, because you would just created a market, that market will very, very quickly figure out what's good and what isn't.
100%.
And
it's ruthless.
And you will soon. So there'll be some hiccups at the beginning, like pretty much anything. But you will then very, very quickly.
Can't be any worse than the way it's going now, where there's no fucking capability getting deployed.
And so you've got then the end user, the operator, the people at the front deciding what software they want, what they need, what maybe small bits of hardware, and actually having the empowerment to go and buy it.
Soldier-driven software.
There's no reason why that can't work. So to me, that is an easy win. It costs nothing. If anything, it will save money.
I get a ton of cost savings at scale.
Yeah. And we will get them. And we're going back to the point about industrial strategy markets. So here you'll get an internal market created, and the market outcomes will be very positive because the word will
lever, like we were talking about at the beginning,
and it will move at speed.
It will.
So that would be, if I was king for the day, decentralization of acquisition down to the lowest level.
That's a great answer, brother. I could do this all day with you. This is such a pleasure. I'm so grateful that you get a ton of stuff going on this week out here. Thanks for spending some time together, and look forward to having a drink tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers, man.
Thanks for all the work you guys do at Second Front.
Take care.
All right, man.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.